So often, it's happened ever since I got into Unity Ministry, and it still happens today. This question always comes up, quite often comes up. Why is this place not filled? Why do not more people resonate with the Unity message? What's going on here? Why does it seem like that it's such a struggle sometimes for us to get people to resonate and to be a part of this ministry, and not only our ministry, but Unity as a whole? And very often, when we're having these conversations, and this is something, again, that I've heard, and I'm sure I've said it, I know I've said it, this idea that people don't come to Unity because Unity teaches us that we have to take responsibility for our lives. Have you heard that? That Unity teaches us that we are responsible. We have to take responsibility for our lives, and that's why most people don't come to Unity. We teach that there is nothing outside of ourselves that is going to rescue us. Nothing outside of ourselves that's going to save us. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to save ourselves from ourselves, right? And so that's what we often hear. And there may be some truth to that. There may, in fact, be some truth to that. And I want to explore that a little bit today. I want to maybe reframe that a little bit for us today, because I think that somehow limits us. And I want to kind of offer us a different way to look at that. And so my title today is You Are Jesus. Now that may seem blasphemous to some folks. Being an old Baptist boy, it seemed blasphemous to me, right? But I was inspired by something I read recently that was written by our co-founder, Charles Fillmore. And it's published in his book, Keep a True Lent. Where the chapter in the book is faith thinking. And what he's talking about is our ability to exercise our power of faith and to really have some control of our thinking nature. And in Unity, when we talk about the 12 powers, each of the disciples represents one of those powers, and Peter happens to represent faith. And he says in there that we must come to the understanding that we are not Peter, the faith thinker, but we are Jesus, metaphysically and metaphorically. That we are Jesus, and until we come to that understanding and begin to live from that understanding, that we will not be able to really consciously co-create, which has been my series, Conscious Co-Creating. And so he says, I believe, he says it there, and he says it many times in many different ways, that Jesus of the Scripture, metaphysically, as we interpret the Scripture, metaphysically and metaphorically, we look at Jesus as the metaphor for that directive power, the I am that we are within us. Again, it's not taking, I had a conversation last Sunday, it's not taking anything away from the master teacher, the way shower Jesus, who embodied that consciousness and who lived that consciousness, to say that you too are that. Or maybe a better way to say it is that Jesus is you. That Jesus of the Scriptures is you. And that the disciples in the Scripture represent each of those capacities. Charles Fillmore defined them as the 12 powers. Their tools, their capacities, their potentials that we all have. But what he says is that we have to understand that we are the master of those powers. That we, like Jesus of the Scripture, called the disciples to him, let's say He called all of those powers to Him, He trained them, He educated them, and then He directed them to do the work of the Father, as He called the source, the divine ideal. And so what Mr. Fillmore, I believe, is saying to us is that we get to operate as the Lord, and again, gender, I'm not referring to gender, but as Lord of our powers. And we get to direct them toward demonstrating and manifesting in the world that which is in alignment with our highest and best for ourselves and for the world. And so when He said, "You are Jesus," I believe that's what He was saying. Not, of course, literally, but metaphorically and metaphysically. And so what I believe He is saying is, again, let me reframe that idea that we're responsible for everything that happens in our lives. Because when we get into this idea that we are responsible for everything that happens in our lives, we can get really caught up in what we sometimes call metaphysical malpractice and metaphysical guilt. Have you ever had somebody ask you if you got sick, "Well, what were you thinking?" What thoughts were going through your mind that you demonstrated this illness? Or you have an accident, you fall down or you hurt yourself in some way, and somebody said, "Well, what lesson were you needing to learn?" So that's the idea that we're responsible for everything that happens in our lives, and that can stimulate metaphysical guilt. How many of you have ever felt metaphysical guilt? Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? What did I do? I'm not saying that there's no validity to that. Our consciousness creates our reality. But when we approach it from the perspective that we are responsible for everything, it can put us into a place of fear. We can get into a place of fear, and fear is never productive. Never. When we're in fear, we operate from fear. We think from fear. We live from fear. We act from fear. And fear only produces more to fear. And so I like the idea, and please I would encourage you to embrace this with me. When somebody talks about unity, teaching that we are responsible for our lives, I'd like us to reframe that. And I would like for us to say that unity teaches us to claim authority in our lives, to claim our spiritual authority. And what I mean by that is that we, again, are the authority, as Jesus represents for us the I am. And the I am is your directive power. And so it's about claiming the authority, becoming that which is the commander, if you will, of the facilities, the capacities, the abilities that we have as human beings. And we've talked about that we become the Lord of our 12 powers. Then we get to decide how our power of imagination is used, how our power of faith is directed. Are we imagining the worst? Are we awfulizing things? Are we imagining the destruction of our lives or the world or whatever? Are we using our power, commanding our power of imagination to imagine a world that embodies and reflects the divine qualities? How many of us are using our imagination in that way? I know that sometimes I don't use my imagination fully in imagining the highest and best. I was taking a trip yesterday to Colorado Springs. My mind immediately went to, I've never been to Colorado Springs when there wasn't an accident on I-25. That's where my mind immediately went. Notice how imagination can be focused in a negative way. So I immediately recognized that's what I was doing. And what Mr. Fillmore says is that when you take command of the power of imagination, then you can imagine everything going smoothly, everything working toward your highest and best good, working toward the highest and best good of all involved. And so that's what I did. I imagined it all going smoothly. I claimed that everything that was happening in my day yesterday was for my highest good. I would not be attached to how it showed up. I would not be attached to the outcome. I was just affirming, knowing, seeing that my day would unfold in perfect divine order. Now, does that mean there wasn't an accident on I-25? No. But I will tell you what happened. I knew where I was going. I didn't need my Google Maps. So I was past Castle Rock, and I got a hit to pull up my Google Maps, and when I did, the woman said, the voice said, exit in 2 miles. It's like, this can't be right. I'm not going to Castle Rock. Why would I exit in 2 miles? And then I looked on the map, and there was this long line of red. And so I tell you that because I believe that's the way it works. That why would I turn on my Google Maps guidance system right at the moment when I needed it to be able to be directed around the traffic and be back in the flow of traffic? It wasn't an accident. I mean, it was an accident, but it wasn't a coincidence that I turned on my guidance system. And I will tell you this. The very same thing happened on my trip back. The very same thing. I had my GPS on, and it was like, there is no path to where you want to go. That is telling. We cannot find a way for you to get there. Wow. That was kind of scary. But what I finally realized was that I had it on find a walking path. Find a walking path from Colorado Springs to Denver. And it was saying, we can't do that. So when I finally realized that, and I clicked it over to the car, the same thing happened. Exit in 1 mile. And I was directed around another accident. Now, some people could say, well, that's just a coincidence, but I don't believe it is. I think when we use our power of imagination to direct our power, to claim the power that we are, that we have, to direct our innate abilities, then I believe the universe responds to that. And so imagination, our power of faith, to trust, to know, all of the powers that we have, and they go beyond the 12 that Charles Fillmore identified, but we can begin there, that we are the directive power. We are, and we have to begin to claim that power if we are truly to consciously co-create in our lives that which is our highest and best good, and not only our highest and best good, but the highest and best good for all creation. Jesus was an example of commanding the powers. Not just the 12 powers, but using his powers. I mean, not just commanding his disciples, but using the powers within him to make those declarative statements. Take up your bed and walk. Peace, be still, calmed the waters. Lazarus, come forth, calling forth the energy of life. He claimed the power, he used the power, and that is our example. And I believe with all my heart that we have that power. We have not yet begun to use it as powerfully as we can. And so when people talk about unity and about what unity teaches, what are we about? I want them to hear that we are about helping and encouraging people to claim the authority in their lives, to use the gifts and talents, resources, powers innate within us as human beings to create a world that mirrors the highest and best within us all. And so I support us in doing just that. I had this image I want to share with you about that in closing. And it was this idea about being the Lord of our powers. You know, the disciples called Jesus Lord. He was their master, really. So I had this idea that each of us is a lord or a lady, or a king or a queen. It's like I think about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Well, you are King Arthur or Queen Anne or the lord or the lady of your realm. And you command the lights of the Round Table, the lights that are represented by your powers. And you, as the king, the queen, the lord, or the lady, have charge over your realm to love and to nurture and to support and to guide and to create and to manifest and to demonstrate all that is in the highest and best good. And so as you claim that power, directing your powers to do the work that is in service to love for self and love for all creation, then we together can demonstrate, manifest a world where every need is met. A world that is embodying the ideas represented in the Declaration for Mother's Day, where everyone is honored, everyone is supported, everyone is fed, everyone has water, everyone has clothes, everyone has a place to live, everyone, where we are all honored as those divine expressions of God. It begins with you and me. It begins with our willingness to stop denying our power, to truly claim it, and to begin to command those powers to do the work within us and outside of us, to consciously co-create this world. And so I thank you for your willingness to show up, to claim your authority in your life, and come together to demonstrate the highest and best ideals for us all. Thank you for that. And so it is.